Before we drift into the life or perhaps existence of Golb, I'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? And what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. So, how do you tell a bedtime story about something that has no beginning? That's kind of the puzzle with Golb. He's not a character in the usual sense. Not someone with a tragic past, not someone chasing a goal or a throne. Golb doesn't monologue, doesn't build kingdoms, doesn't even seem to care. In fact, he might not even understand what caring is. He just is. And he always has been. Long before the land of Ooo, before the Candy Kingdom, before Prismo's time room was even a weird little ripple in the time stream. There was Golb, or at least there were whispers of him. Forces like Prismo or the cosmic owl can shape fate or grant wishes, but Golb unravels everything they try to build. He's like a black hole in a dream. You can't fully look at him, and yet you know he's there, pressing at the edges of everything. Some say Golb doesn't exist within time at all, that he exists in opposition to it. While the rest of the multiverse flows like a gentle stream, with some chaotic splashing here and there, Golb is the crack in the riverbed, the void underneath. He is not part of the story. He's what happens when the story breaks. Think of it like this. If the multiverse were a beautifully decorated cake, layered with frosting, filled with jelly, maybe even dusted with those sparkly edible stars, Golb would be the fork. Not even your fork, just the fork. Eternal. Hungry. Confused about social etiquette. There are ancient legends, long lost and only hinted at in the farthest corners of Adventure Time, that speak of primordial forces, things without names or faces. These aren't your usual big bads with sharp teeth and a motive. These are more like natural disasters, but worse, cosmic malfunctions. Golb seems to be at the top of that eerie list. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and forget why you're there? That sudden, jarring disconnect? Some theorize that Golb is like the universal version of that. A fundamental flaw in the structure of reality. A reminder that no matter how neatly things are stacked, there's always the possibility they can collapse, just because. He is the embodiment of corruption. Not just rot and ruin, but the corruption of meaning itself. Stories, language, laws of nature, things that give the universe a sense of order, begin to fall apart in Golb's presence. Like, if you ever met Golb, your name might stop working. You wouldn't remember what color is. Your cereal might taste like regret. Soft regret, though. The sleepy kind. Maybe with marshmallows. What's so fascinating and eerie is how little even the cosmic entities know about him. Prismo, who can bend time and casually create alternate realities like he's flicking through a playlist, doesn't try to fight Golb. He avoids him. The cosmic owl, who delivers prophetic dreams to everyone from candy people to lich-possessed wolves, never dreams of Golb. Golb exists outside of their systems, beyond rules, beyond cause and effect. He's not evil in the way villains are evil. He doesn't want destruction. He is destruction, a concept, a force, a presence. And yet, somehow he's personal. You'll notice that those touched by Golb, like Magic Man, don't just suffer physically. They unravel emotionally, spiritually. It's like their soul loses Wi-Fi. That's a joke, but it's also kind of true. People affected by Golb lose their connection, not just to reality, but to meaning itself. And meaning, as it turns out, is the thing that lets you love, cry, hope, or even sleep. So how far back does Golb's presence go? We don't know, but we can guess. And that's what we'll do next. In the far edges of time, where even stars grow cold and memory begins to fray, there are hints, lost timelines, vanished civilizations, realms erased without even a trace. And if you look close enough, not too close, or you'll get that funny feeling behind your eyes, you'll notice something, a pattern, a presence, a force, uninvited but ever present, above. And yet, despite being so unknowable, Golb's fingerprints, or well, chaos prints, seem to show up all over the tapestry of the multiverse. Not in obvious ways. He doesn't knock on the door and announce himself like some Saturday morning villain. Golb doesn't do doorways. He seeps in. Imagine entire worlds that just stop. No cataclysm, no battle, just silence. Like a candle that burns out in the middle of a sentence. These are the kinds of places whispered about in the oldest records of the multiverse, if you can even call them records. Sometimes they're more like smudged memories on cosmic post-it notes, but every now and then a pattern emerges. Worlds that folded in on themselves. Timelines where time refused to tick. Realities where physics curled up like a scared little bug and said, nope. And when that happens, Golb is often the suspected culprit. Not confirmed, of course. You can't confirm a whisper. But the silence left behind, that's usually enough. There's this theory, granted, whispered by a slightly unhinged cosmic jellyfish, so grain of salt, but still an interesting one. It claims Golb is what remains when a universe loses its narrative, when it forgets how to be a story. And in a show like Adventure Time, where even the most surreal things follow emotional arcs and logic of the heart, that's terrifying. Because Golb doesn't just erase plot. He erases why the plot mattered. Now let's take a cozy little detour. Imagine you're one of the earliest beings to develop consciousness. You're floating through a brand new cosmos, molecules still high-fiving each other for existing, and suddenly you feel it. A shadow with no shape. A thought that's not yours, but it thinks you. A presence older than even being. No roaring voice, no command. Just a slow, dissolving pressure in your sense of self. That's Golb. Not a destroyer in the way we imagine villains, cackling and twirling their metaphorical mustaches, but more like the awkward glitch in a dream you can't quite fix. The moment you realize something's off, and then moments later realize you're what's off. He doesn't want power, he doesn't want revenge, he doesn't even want lunch. Honestly, that might be the scariest part. What kind of monster isn't at least a little snacky? And what's more chilling is how Golb seems to appear in different forms, or rather, how different minds interpret him differently. He's not bound to a shape or language. To some, he might look like a floating head surrounded by writhing shapes. To others, maybe a sound that doesn't end, or a smell that reminds you of something that never happened. It's said that even attempting to comprehend Golb fully can lead to madness, not because he's trying to hurt you, but because he doesn't fit in the part of your mind that expects things to make sense. He's like trying to fold a nightmare into a bedtime story. The pieces just won't go together. Which makes our little mission here tonight kind of funny, huh? Trying to gently talk about an ancient, incomprehensible force of unraveling chaos right before bed. But that's the charm of it, isn't it? If we can whisper the dark things into the night with a soft tone and a cozy blanket, maybe they don't seem quite so scary. Maybe they become just another part of the dream. Or at least a weird background character in your dreams who eats gravity for breakfast. And here's something else to ponder while you rest your head. Golb has never spoken. Never once, in all the timelines and universes we've peered into, Has he delivered a single word? Not even a cryptic, "I am inevitable," or a melodramatic "fools," just silence. And in that silence is a strange kind of dominance, because while others explain themselves, argue, plead, or monologue their intentions, Golb simply is. He doesn't care if you understand him. He doesn't even care if he understands him. He's beyond comprehension, even by himself. Now that's commitment to the bit. And yet you have to wonder, does Golb ever get lonely? It's an odd question, but it's been asked by a few adventurous cosmic scholars, usually right before they go a little cross-eyed and start naming their houseplants after abstract concepts. If Golb is the only thing of his kind, outside time, outside story, outside everything, what does that feel like? Or is feeling itself a luxury he's never had? We'll probably never know. But the idea that there's a being that vast, that permanent, that utterly disconnected from all the warmth and weirdness of life, well, it's a little sad, isn't it? But don't worry, sleepyhead. We're safe for now. As we float deeper into this lore and your eyes start to get heavy, we'll soon drift closer to the multiverse, where beings began to notice Golb, where his presence started leaving more than whispers. Soon the quiet background hum of Golb would become a faint tremor in the minds of the powerful, and some couldn't resist looking closer. And looking too close has consequences. The thing about Golb is, even when people don't know what he is, they feel him. Not like a sudden jump scare in the night, but more like walking into a room and forgetting what you were looking for. A gentle disorientation. Like something in the world shifted, but no one else seems to notice. And the strange part? That's often how it starts. Across the infinite folds of the multiverse, wise beings, cosmic sages, scholars, overly ambitious wizards, have all reached a similar point in their studies. A place where understanding begins to slip through their fingers like sand. They're looking for the source of everything, the reason why, the engine behind existence. And right at the edge of their breakthrough is Golb. Not a revelation, not a conclusion, just static. It's said that some of these beings, upon encountering that mental void, became obsessed, not with power or control. Those are simple cravings. No, they were drawn to unmeaning, to the idea that everything they ever knew, ever built, ever believed, could dissolve. And in that strange paradox, they found comfort, or madness, or maybe both. Let's pause for a moment to admire the patience of Golb. He doesn't knock over kingdoms like a toddler with a juice box and a grudge. No, his influence spreads like a low fog, quiet and inevitable. It might take centuries or even millennia, but eventually things bend. The cracks form. And without lifting a finger, assuming he has fingers, which, honestly, no one's really sure about, Golb's presence wins. Even the Lich, one of the most terrifying, deliberate agents of destruction, may just be an echo of Golb's philosophy. Not a servant, not a herald, just a byproduct. A fossil of Golb's passive touch, hardened into a creature with goals and a voice and terrifying poetry. But Golb doesn't need poetry. Golb doesn't rhyme. He is the silence after the rhyme. And then there's the idea, soft and speculative, like a bedtime riddle, that Golb isn't just a presence but a balance. That for every being who represents structure, Prismo with his timelines, the cosmic owl with his dreams, there must be something that ensures it doesn't all grow too rigid, too perfect. Maybe Golb is the multiverse's failsafe, not to ruin things, but to remind reality not to take itself too seriously. Because if everything worked exactly how it should, well, that would be kind of boring, wouldn't it? No plot twists, no chaos, no Adventure Time, and no Ice King fan fiction, which would be the real tragedy. Now let's talk visuals for a moment. Because while most cosmic beings in Adventure Time have a look, Prismo is all pink and chill, Orgalorg is like a creepy space penguin, Golb, he's different. He doesn't have a face in the comforting sense, just a shifting, screaming presence, a red writhing mass of dissonant geometry and gaping mouths that don't speak but somehow scream anyway. He doesn't walk, he doesn't fly, he arrives. Like an idea that was never supposed to be spoken out loud. And when he's near, everything else seems to get fuzzy. Even the characters, the world, the story itself starts to feel thin, like the edges of a dream you're waking up from too soon. Shapes twist, sounds bend, meaning loses its grip. And yet, somehow he feels intentional. As if the universe, in all its brilliance, included Golb on purpose, not as a flaw, but as part of the recipe. Which begs the question, what kind of story needs something like Golb? There's a beautiful discomfort in this kind of storytelling, isn't there? We're used to bedtime tales with happy endings, with lessons wrapped in bows and characters who change for the better. But Golb doesn't change. He doesn't learn. And he certainly doesn't apologize. He just is. And maybe, just maybe, there's a certain kind of peace in that. Because while life can feel uncertain and messy and unpredictable, Golb is consistently, well, Golb. A constant reminder that not everything needs to make sense. That sometimes meaning can exist alongside nonsense. That the multiverse is big enough to hold both structure and chaos, creation and unraveling. So maybe Golb isn't here to destroy bedtime. Maybe he's just the weird cosmic blanket fort that wraps around the idea that even ununderstandable things can belong. Some theorists, especially those with too much free time and access to multiversal archives, believe Golb's existence is not accidental. That something somewhere, at the very start of time, built him, or called him, or maybe released him. Now, who or what would be capable of that? Well, that's a mystery for another segment, but I'll say this. If someone did awaken Golb, they probably thought they were doing something important, something necessary, and they probably didn't have a backup plan. Oops. And here's the wildest theory of all. Brace yourself, pillow in hand. What if Golb is just asleep? Seriously? What if everything we've seen, everything that's happened because of him, is just a dreaming of Golb? A passive, subconscious tremor in a being so ancient and vast that even his naps cause universes to come undone. If that's true, let's just hope he doesn't wake up. Because if this is what happens when he's snoozing, I don't think we want to see what Monday morning Golb looks like. Probably grumpy, definitely unshowered, absolutely allergic to hope. You see, even though Golb's earliest actions, or echoes, remain wrapped in the fog of prehistory, it's what came next that gave his legend shape. It's not the destruction alone that made the universe tremble. It's how subtle it was. How no one knew it was happening until it already had. That's the Golb way. Like a tune you forgot you were humming, only to realize it's the sound of a world fading away. Now, somewhere deep in the folds of the multiverse, there are lost libraries. Not the kind with quiet corners and overdue fees, but libraries built out of memory and light. Places where ancient knowledge was stored before even the first suns ignited. And in those places, if you believe the tales whispered by long-deleted scholars, there are records, not of Golb's arrival, but of his absence. Entire realms erased. Not scorched, not crumbled, just gone. Their timelines no longer connect. their coordinates deleted from the record of existence. It's hard to describe just how unsettling that is, because you can prepare for a battle. You can resist an enemy. But how do you resist non-existence? Imagine reading a book, and halfway through the page, the ink just disappears. The story forgets itself. That's Golb, not a villain in the plot, but the force that makes plots impossible. And once, long ago, so long ago, it may never have even happened, the beings who noticed this unraveling began to react. Some ran. Some tried to shield their dimensions behind protective magic, timelines woven tighter than ever before. Others, perhaps braver or simply more foolish, decided to study Golb, to watch the pattern of decay, to measure it like it could be charted. Spoiler alert, that didn't end well. Turns out, staring into the eye of chaos doesn't grant you wisdom. It grants you a permanent headache, and sometimes tentacles. One wizard in particular, a name now lost, but often referred to in whispery, multiversal margins as the listener, believed he could talk to Golb, not in words, but in the language of vibrations and feeling. He meditated in collapsing timelines, stood in the folds between fading stars, and listened for something beyond thoughts. And one night he heard it. Not a voice, a feeling. A deep, bone-heavy wrongness. A note so low it vibrated his soul like a string pulled too tight. And in that instant, he understood something terrifying. Golb isn't coming. Golb is always here. We're just not always paying attention. Now, let's slow it down for a second. Take a deep breath, in through the nose, and out through the existential dread. There we go. This is still a sleepy story, after all. And while Golb may be a cosmic constant of unmaking, we're still wrapped in our own little pocket of peace. We can afford to gently explore these mysteries without panic, like stargazing from a safe distance, where the meteors can't reach and the vacuum of space is just a pretty backdrop. So let's drift just a little further. You might wonder, if Golb has always been, why doesn't he do more? Why hasn't he unmade everything? Well, that's a question that keeps even the cosmic owl tossing and turning some nights. Because there are two possible answers, and both are unsettling. 1. Golb is limited somehow, not in power but in purpose. Maybe his function isn't to destroy everything, only some things, just enough to keep the universe from calcifying into a predictable, static story. Just enough chaos to keep life interesting. Or 2, he's just waiting. And somehow that second one feels worse. Because if Golb can erase it all, and just hasn't yet, then that means we're living in the waiting room. The pause before the last page. And bedtime stories? They're just lullabies for a universe hoping the final chord never plays. But there's a beautiful resistance in that too. Because even in a world where Golb exists, so does you. So do stories. So does friendship and music. And cinnamon buns shaped like elephants. So does love. So do second chances. And dreams and naps. Even Adventure Time itself is a celebration of that, this wild, unpredictable tapestry of sweetness and sadness and growth, of people making meaning even when the cosmos says, why bother? And Golb, he might be the question, but we are the answer. The multiverse may never defeat Golb, but it can choose to go on anyway, to keep telling stories, to keep making breakfast, to keep falling in love with weird little rainbows that yell about positivity. Golb cannot erase that spirit. Not fully, not forever. So now, dear listener, as you begin to relax deeper into your blanket, and your thoughts start to soften like the edges of a dream, let that idea linger. Golb has always been here. but so has hope. What does it look like when the idea of Golb becomes something real? Let's find out next time. Sleepyhead, you're doing great. If you're not already halfway to dreamland, then good, because what we're diving into next is the stuff of whispered legends, quiet collapses, forgotten places, realms that don't make it into the bedtime stories because, well, they don't exist anymore. At least, not in the way they used to. Tonight we're stepping into the shadowy space between timelines, into the broken mirrors of the multiverse. And if segment 1 was all about the presence of Golb before everything began, segment 2 is where we start to see what that presence actually does when it touches the fabric of reality. Spoiler, it's not great. But don't worry, we'll move gently. We got warm blankets, sleepy voices, and just enough multiversal confusion to make your eyelids extra heavy. So let's begin. Picture this. A world not unlike Ooo. Rolling green hills, sunsets that turn the skies violet, talking animals, candy people, floating cities, your usual magical nonsense. And then one day, the birds stop singing. Not because they're scared. Not because something chased them away. They just stop. People begin to feel off, like dreams are forgetting how to finish themselves. Like food no longer tastes quite right, even though the ingredients haven't changed. The stars overhead, slightly out of place, like someone scrambled the sky just a little. Not enough to alarm anyone, just enough to make the world feel like it's leaning to one side. That's how the silent wars begin. Not with a bang, but with a blink. Now, these aren't wars in the traditional sense. No armies, no flags, no cheesy villain speeches while lightning flashes in the background. The silent wars are a term coined by old paranoid scribes of the ancient multiverse, referring to the quiet unraveling of entire worlds where Golb's touch crept in unnoticed. The first documented instance, if you trust a diary written in reverse and buried in the sands of a realm that technically doesn't exist anymore, was in a reality known as Aeon 7. Aeon 7 was a peaceful realm, all organic trees, floating whales, and deeply philosophical mushrooms. The kind of place where arguments ended in sing-alongs and no one ever misplaced their socks. Truly paradise. But then, subtle things began to change. Languages began to lose meaning. The word for sky shifted into gibberish. People who spoke it began forgetting how to speak entirely. Time loops appeared, short ones, like a day repeating over and over, but only for some people. A scholar named Vina, a time weaver with a sharp mind and a weird fondness for cactus tea, tried to investigate. She started tracing the loops, following the linguistic shifts, the distortions in gravity, and all signs pointed to a central phenomenon. Something that wasn't there, but was still affecting everything. She never got to publish her findings. One day, her ink stopped working. Her hands forgot how to write. And then, so did the memory of her hands. A week later, Aeon 7 folded in on itself, or unraveled. Accounts differ. Some say it became a new star. Others say it just went silent. The only thing left behind? A single phrase burned into a floating piece of obsidian. He was never meant to see. Whether he was Vina or someone else entirely, no one knows. But many believe it was Golb himself reacting, instinctively maybe, to a world that got too close. And Aeon 7 was just the beginning. Across countless timelines, similar stories emerge. The realm of Marnies, where dreams began spilling into daylight. People would be walking to the market and suddenly be caught in their own nightmares, memories looping, reshaping reality like wet clay. Marnis' entire economy collapsed when it became impossible to tell the difference between real fruit and dream fruit. Unfortunate for the fruit vendors, delicious for dream goats. One morning, all clocks in Marnus stopped ticking. The sun hovered on the horizon, caught in an eternal, not quite morning. The final message sent from that realm was broadcast in a burst of static, followed by a single whispered phrase. The boundary is gone. Gone. Just like them. And again. No war. No enemies. Just a slow, strange silence. Like the world sighing for the last time. The silent wars were never fought. They were endured. By people who couldn't explain what was happening to them. And even the few who understood, they could barely warn others. Because Golb doesn't just corrupt space or time. He corrupts meaning, memory, communication. Whole worlds have tried to send warnings, but their messages arrive scrambled, fragmented, or worse, rewritten into lullabies, poems, or sitcom scripts. There's even a dimension called Echo 4, where the warning message about Golb arrived in the form of a children's jingle about soup. Catchy tune. Terrible implications. And still, most of the multiverse kept on spinning, unaware. Because the silent wars don't leave ruins. They leave nothing. And nothing, dear listener, is very hard to investigate. Now, you might be wondering, if these silent wars really happened, and entire timelines were swallowed up like marshmallows in hot tea, why doesn't anyone remember? That's the thing about Golb. He doesn't just erase the place. He erases the memory of the place. The record, the echoes, the ripples. It's like he has a cosmic eraser that works in every direction. Past, present, and the idea of future. All wiped clean, like it never mattered in the first place. But once in a while, something slips through. A leftover artifact. A song. A dream that doesn't belong to you. These little glitches, the kind that make a wizard look up from his spellbook and say, "Wait, what was I just doing?" They're the only hints left behind. And across the multiverse, there are collectors. Quiet, lonely people who gather these fragments. They don't know exactly what they're collecting, only that the pieces feel wrong, out of sync, slightly off-key, like puzzle pieces from a picture no one remembers painting. One such collector, an ancient jellyfish sage named Trundle, because, of course, it's a jellyfish, once assembled a gallery of forgotten realms, glimpses of places that should no longer exist. A painting of a beach with 3 moons, none of which match any known celestial map. A song that, when played backward, makes you feel like you're remembering something from before you were born. A glass teacup that refills itself with rainwater, even indoors, even in space. And Trundle, wise and wobbly as he was, believed all these fragments were the same kind of thing, evidence of Golb's passing. Not footprints, but absence prints. Places where something once was and now isn't, except for that last little smear of weirdness that didn't quite fade all the way. Let's drift further now. To a place you've definitely never heard of, because no one has. Not anymore. The realm was called Yethor, and it was, according to speculative whisperings, a place of perfect balance. No wars, no diseases, no pizza, sadly, but they were working on it. But one day, a small tear appeared in the sky. Not a portal, not an invader. Just a flicker. For 10 full rotations, nothing changed. People pointed at the sky and said, "Huh, that's odd." Then they went about their lives. But by the 11th day, the laws of probability started acting drunk. Dice refused to land. Coins spun forever. Children's names began to change mid-sentence. One little girl was called 4 different names in one afternoon, and her parents just rolled with it like nothing happened. And then came the voices, not from above, not from below, from inside. They weren't loud. They didn't shout. They whispered things like, "Do you remember me? And this is not your shape." Pleasant stuff for a Tuesday evening. Yethor's greatest scientist, known as the Circle of Knowing Eyes, which, yes, is a little on the nose, tried to intervene. They fired spells at the tear, launched philosophical missiles, even tried to reason with it. But nothing responded. Because Golb doesn't bargain. Golb doesn't even notice. On the 23rd day, Yethor's oceans began to float. Not rise, float. Large, damp blobs drifting lazily through the air like sleepy whales. And by the 30th day, the entire realm folded inward. Not with fire, not with screams, just a polite, whispery sigh. A realm excused itself from existence. And all that was left? A calendar. Just one. Still ticking. Still counting. Though no one knows what it's counting toward. Now, this may sound eerie, and it is. But remember, Golb doesn't chase. He doesn't hunt. He's not coming for your bedtime snack or your dreams. His influence spreads only when something opens the door. A crack in the narrative, a fray in the timeline, a curiosity that spirals a little too far. That's when the unraveling begins, not maliciously, but inevitably. And that's what makes the Silent Wars so chilling. Because they don't begin with an invasion. They begin with a question. Let that thought settle for a moment. Somewhere out there, in the folds between what was and what never will be, there are still realms unraveling, some in silence, some so slowly that their people think everything is just fine, just a little weird lately. And in the core of it all, Golb. Or maybe not Golb exactly, but the idea of him. A creeping anti-pattern that undoes meaning, that turns stories into static, that turns what happened into, was there ever anything at all? But here's the comfort in all of this. If you're hearing this, if you're still dreaming, if you're still you, then your story is still being told. Your realm, however sleepy or strange or beautifully chaotic, is still holding together. And that means you're stronger than you think. Even if your dice sometimes don't land right, even if your Tuesday feels like it's whispering back at you, you're still here. There's a myth, tucked away in the dusty corners of multiversal folklore, of a traveler known only as Nusk. No title, no kingdom, just Nusk. Some say they were once a librarian, or maybe a mapmaker. Others say Nusk wasn't a person at all, but a sentient string of memories trying to find a body that would stick. Either way, what makes Nusk interesting isn't what they were, it's what they survived. They were said to be from a realm called Viral, which, by all accounts, was a place where knowledge was power, literal power. The more you learned, the brighter you glowed. Imagine being halfway through your cereal and someone walks by, radiating because they just figured out quantum jam theory. Viral was thriving, right up until the brightness began to flicker. Books started rearranging their letters, not magically, just wrong. Nonsense sentences, recipes that told you to saute shadows or boil time. Bright ones began to dim. The more they tried to learn, the less they understood, until eventually, understanding itself was impossible. It was said Nusk held on longer than anyone, not by outsmarting the decay, but by accepting it. Writing down their memories by hand, again and again, knowing they'd forget, leaving trails for themselves to follow, whispering their own name like a lullaby so they wouldn't disappear. And when Viral fell, when the world folded into that familiar hushed oblivion, Nusk stepped across the breach and lived. Here's where it gets weird, or weirder. Let's be honest, we passed normal a long time ago. Nusk wandered from realm to realm, never staying long, They carried no weapons, only a bag full of broken compasses and 2 spoons that didn't match. They spoke in half-phrases and riddles, and always asked the same question upon arriving. Is your story still whole? Some found this eerie, some found it comforting. And a few, particularly those who'd seen strange weather patterns like time raining sideways or doors that opened into last week, took it as a warning. Those people usually packed up and left. And funnily enough, their realms remained. No one knows where Nusk went in the end. Some say they became part of the time room. Others believe they're still out there, drifting from story to story like a cosmic editor, patching holes with string and soft-spoken metaphors. But the important thing is, Nusk remembered. Even when the world forgot itself, they remembered something. A name, a shape, a thread. And sometimes, that's enough to survive. Which brings us to a deeply comforting idea in all this eerie quiet. Not everyone who brushes against Golb vanishes. Some adapt. Some walk through the chaos and come back changed. A little warped, sure. A little extra fond of talking to lamps or naming clouds. But changed doesn't mean gone. And in some cases, those who return carry stories that ripple outward. Subtle warnings, strange metaphors, bedtime tales that make children shiver and giggle at the same time. You've probably heard them in some form. Don't open doors that weren't there yesterday. If the stars rearrange into words, don't read them out loud. If you dream in reverse, wake up facing north. Little things, whispers, folk sayings. But some of those old bedtime rhymes are more than just nonsense. They're defenses. Tiny charms passed from realm to realm, generation to generation. Not enough to stop Golb, but maybe enough to remind the world to stay whole, to keep stories grounded, to keep the plot from slipping off the rails. It's said that music helps. Not because Golb hates tunes, though one assumes he's not a fan of accordions, but because music is structured emotion, and Golb, being the anti-pattern, can't process structure that's felt, not just thought. So songs, especially songs sung with heart, may be the multiverse's most ancient and accidental form of resistance. Sing enough lullabies and maybe the chaos stays just a little farther away. And then, of course, there are the fragments. Not people, not whole realms, just leftovers. There's a cave in a quiet part of the Candy Kingdom where the walls hum at midnight, only at midnight, and only if you're eating butterscotch. That cave is said to echo the signature of a world called Dren, long lost. The hum is its last recorded song. A time traveler once returned with a cracked hourglass full of sand that falls upward. He claimed it was from a realm that collapsed while he was inside it. The sand, he says, is what's left of their memories. And even Prismo's time room, pristine and vast and carefully maintained, has a single corridor that loops forever. It doesn't appear on any map. Prismo calls it the Oops Hallway. He doesn't like talking about it. But he keeps it. Maybe as a reminder. Or maybe because even a cosmic wish-granter can't quite erase everything Golb touches. It's strange, isn't it? The way something so quiet can be so terrifying. Golb doesn't break things loudly. He unthreads them. He picks at the seams, and by the time anyone notices, the shape of the world is already shifting. But again, and I'll keep whispering this as long as you're listening, some people remember, some stories survive. And that means there's still hope. Even in forgotten realms, even in unraveling timelines, even in the back corners of existence, where the stars blink too slowly and the ground sometimes sighs when no one's standing on it, there are still voices, still songs, still spoons that don't match, clinking quietly in borrowed teacups. And that means we're not done yet. Now let's gently pivot towards something a little closer to home. Because up to this point, the silent wars have felt distant, haven't they? Stories from forgotten corners of the multiverse, strange half-remembered fables about worlds you've never seen, people you've never met, and timelines that don't fit anywhere on a map. But here's the sleepy twist, dear dreamer. The ripples were never really that far away. They've been brushing up against Ooo for a long, long time. Let's start with the obvious. Remember the Lich? Of course you do. A spooky green, skull-faced creature who talks like he swallowed an entire Shakespeare festival. Yeah, him. He's the clearest example we have of Golb's silent legacy manifesting in something solid. Something you can point at and say, yep, that's probably not friendly. But what's often missed is that the Lich wasn't born from evil in the traditional sense. He wasn't cooked up in some villain's lab or forged in the fires of angst. He was left behind, like a mold that grows in the space where a story used to be. And where did that space come from? Golb. Not directly, not intentionally, just inevitably. It's like Golb, whispered into the cracks of a dying world, specifically Earth, post-Mushroom War, and out slithered the Lich, a physical echo of all that had been lost. No goals at first, just absence wearing a face. It was only later in Ooo that the Lich began to take shape, began to speak, began to want. But by then, the infection had already taken root. And the thing is, once you start looking for Golb's fingerprints, you can't stop seeing them. Marceline's memories of the old world, fragmented, faded. There are moments in her past that simply don't connect anymore, as if pieces of her story have been snipped out and tucked under Golb's pillow. Magic, the very fabric of it in Ooo is wild and inconsistent. Some of it works like a song, some of it obeys math, and some of it doesn't obey anything. Because not all magic in Ooo was born of whimsy or science. Some of it may have seeped in from places already touched by Golb. Even the time room, which was supposed to be stable and secure, shows signs of soft corruption. There are timelines within it that flicker, realities where Prismo once granted a wish, only to watch the outcome unravel itself from the inside out. Not violently, just wrongly. You wouldn't even notice, unless you were paying very, very close attention. Or unless you couldn't fall asleep and accidentally wished for a sandwich that devoured your childhood. Which, to be clear, has only happened once. Prismo doesn't like to talk about it. Now, the real shiver comes with the realization that the silent wars might not have ended. They just changed tactics. Instead of entire realms vanishing overnight, now we see smaller cracks, personal ones. Think about all the characters in Adventure Time who've had their sense of self fractured. The Ice King, Simon Petrikov, who became a walking contradiction, a tragedy wearing a clown skin. That wasn't just the crown. That was Golb's whisper lingering in the background. The slow erosion of identity, of meaning, of memory. Think about Betty, a genius, pulled forward in time, who sacrificed everything to save Simon, and ended up fusing with Golb, not consumed, not destroyed, merged. And here's the haunting part. She stayed. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She whispered a wish to protect him, and somehow the chaos listened. It's one of the only known moments where someone touched Golb and survived, changed, but still herself. So maybe the silent wars aren't silent anymore. Maybe they're just quieter now, smaller, closer. Happening not across galaxies, but in hearts, in identities, in a little reality slips that no one notices until the sky changes color or their name suddenly doesn't feel quite right anymore. But it's not all doom. It never is. Because if Adventure Time has taught us anything, it's that weirdness isn't the end. It's the beginning of understanding. And if the story still has characters, and those characters still feel and fall and love and try, then even Golb can't erase that. Even chaos can't override hope. So now, sleepyhead, as your eyelids grow heavy and your thoughts start to melt into dreams, let this thought drift with you. The silent wars may still echo through the multiverse, but they haven't reached you. Not tonight. Not while your blanket is tucked, your breathing is soft, and your mind is floating just far enough away to be safe from anything unthreatening. You're still here. Still snuggled in, blankets tucked, thoughts starting to slow. Yes, tonight's tale floats us gently into the chaotic mind and tragic story of none other than Magic Man. Now, before we go any further, let's pause and appreciate the absolute mess of a character this guy is. Trickster, sorcerer, philosopher, prank-pulling madman. Because deep underneath the jokes and jabs, Magic Man is a man undone by chaos. And some believe Golb had a hand in it. Now let's roll it back for just a moment. Magic Man wasn't always Magic Man. He was once just normal man. A Martian, yes, as in from Mars, with a real name, real relationships, and a genius intellect. He was curious. Kind of charming, even. And above all, he had love. Specifically, he loved a woman named Margles. She was his partner, his anchor, and according to the few soft memories Magic Man still let slip, possibly the only person who ever made him feel sane. Together, they lived in peace. Martian peace, sure, which probably included sandstorms and floating cats. But still, peace. And then, she was gone. Vanished, taken, erased. And just like that, something inside him broke. Not just his heart, not just his mind. Something deeper. Some say it was grief, others say it was rage. But there's a quieter, more unsettling theory whispered among timeline archivists. That in the moment of Margles' disappearance, Magic Man caught a glimpse of Golb. Just a flicker, a ripple. A wrinkle in space-time that reached through and unstitched the thing he loved most, not as an act of cruelty, wait easy, but as a cosmic shrug. The kind of destruction that doesn't even know it's doing harm. And Magic Man? He didn't understand what he'd seen. Not fully, but it changed him. After that moment, he stopped following the rules. Not just social ones, those were the first to go, of course. Magic Man once turned a sentient cactus into a tax auditor just to ruin a stranger's picnic. No, he stopped following the rules of reality. He bent space, twisted logic, invented emotions that didn't exist and then infected others with them. He became painful to be around, literally. Anyone who interacted with Magic Man too long felt their sense of self dissolve, their personality unravel. Sound familiar? Yep. It's not just madness. It's Golbian madness. The kind of unmaking that doesn't leave scars, it leaves holes. And what makes it so sad, so painfully sad, is that Magic Man wasn't trying to be evil. He was trying to cope. to deal with the shapeless grief left in the wake of cosmic chaos. And because he didn't know what Golb was, he became a mirror to it. Now, not everything Magic Man did was harmful on purpose. Sometimes he was just trying to understand what happened to him, trying to replicate it, reverse engineer it, which, as you might imagine, is not a great idea when it might be the whispering entropy of the multiverse. There's an old Martian scroll, half-burned, mostly censored, that talks about a device Magic Man built during his descent. A chaotic orb, tuned to nonsense frequencies, designed to recreate the emotional essence of universal subtraction. Translated? He was trying to feel what Golb felt, to understand that blankness. The result? 3 nearby moons developed self-esteem issues. One of them stopped rotating out of spite. But even through all the mischief and madness, there are moments, small, fleeting ones, where Magic Man falters. He stares at a rock for too long. He cries when no one is watching. He says Margle's name and then laughs to cover the crack in his voice. Because buried under all that mayhem is a man who lost everything to something he couldn't name. And if Golb really was the thing that took Margle's, that frayed the edges of Magic Man's world, then Magic Man is more than just a prankster. He's a casualty, a survivor of a war that never made a sound. Now, when someone starts turning moons into emotional wrecks and casually altering the psychological states of entire civilizations, eventually someone notices. In Magic Man's case, it was the Martian High Council, a group of floating brainy types who decided, in no uncertain terms, that he had officially crossed the line from misunderstood genius to unpredictable cosmic hazard. So what did they do? They didn't imprison him. They didn't destroy him. That would have been too clean. No, they decided to punish him. And not with pain, with empathy. His magical madness wasn't just taken away. It was replaced with a system that would inflict his own emotional destruction back onto himself. Every act of chaos, every ripple of mischief, every mind-twisting spell would now rebound with equal force, flooding Magic Man with the same level of heartbreak, confusion, and grief that he'd inflicted on others. He didn't stop being dangerous, but he started being sad. All the time. A permanent ache, wrapped in bright colors and magic tricks, like painting a house fire in rainbow shades and pretending it's art. They cast him out, exiled to Earth, a world already cracked, already strange, already echoing with the soft tremors of Golb's influence. A fitting place for a man with a broken mind and a universe-sized hole where love used to live. And there he wandered, not to be healed, just to exist, to rattle around like a marble in a glass jar, bumping into lives and bending logic with every sigh. Sometimes he turned people into cheese. Sometimes he made mountains cry. One time he just stood in a field for 6 hours screaming, "Why isn't this helping?" And honestly, that last one is probably the most human thing he's ever done. But here's where it gets interesting. Because even broken things, even chaos-drenched prank wizards with serious emotional baggage can still grow. And somewhere, somehow, Magic Man began to change. Not because anyone saved him. Not because he suddenly understood Golb. But because someone, a literal child with a stretchy dog and too much heart, saw him. Really saw him. Finn. That strange little adventurer who treats monsters like misunderstood cousins and sees hope in just about everything. He didn't laugh at Magic Man. He didn't fear him. And that one tiny thing, that moment of connection, after everything Magic Man had lost, was like a single drop of clean water falling into an ocean of sludge. It didn't fix him, but it gave him a direction. Now, for most people, healing takes time. But for a reality-warping Martian wizard, it takes cosmic intervention, a soul-swap spell, and a dramatic fall from grace that strips away everything you once were. Which brings us to one of the strangest moments in Magic Man's story, his transformation into normal man. He loses his magic, all of it, wiped clean. And for the first time in centuries, maybe longer, he wakes up without the noise, without the madness, without the endless hum of Golb's echo scratching at the back of his mind. He's just a guy, a little confused, a little guilty, a little lost, but quiet. This part of the story's slow. No chaos, no tricks, no floating moons crying into the space pillows. Just a man trying to figure out how to live again. He builds things, talks to people, stares at the stars and wonders if any of them remember who he used to be. And what's beautiful, quietly beautiful, is that the madness doesn't come back. The Golb touch fades. Maybe because without the magic, there's no signal to amplify it. Or maybe because, for the first time since losing Margles, he lets the silence in without trying to fight it. And in that silence, there's healing. So what does this tell us about Golb? Well, maybe that even Golb's influence, deep, dark, unrelenting, isn't forever. Maybe people touched by chaos can still find their way back. Not to what they were, that part's gone. But to something new, something gentler, and maybe, just maybe, something better. So there he is, normal man, living in a world that's just a little too soft for someone who once turned a person into a talking ham sandwich for sneezing too loudly. No more spells, no more reality-bending jokes. Just long days, slow mornings, and the humbling business of figuring out how to be again. And while he's not quite sure how to live a normal life, he tries every day. He plants weird vegetables. He builds tiny monuments to Martian art that nobody but him understands. He makes up little songs about toast, one of which is genuinely quite catchy. Finn hums it while brushing his teeth. Jake harmonizes. But even in this peaceful post-chaos existence, there's still a flicker, a faint hum, a whisper in the spaces between seconds. Because you don't spend centuries soaked in magic that echoes Golb's entropy without leaving some kind of mark. And though his powers are gone, the memory of what he once was lingers. Not just in others' eyes, but in his own reflection. Sometimes he looks at his hands and can't remember if they've ever not glowed with madness. Sometimes he wakes up with tears on his face and no dream to explain them. Sometimes he stands very still, very quiet, and whispers Margles' name like it's a spell, a soft one, a spell that doesn't hurt. And this, sleepyhead, is where things get really interesting. Because while normal man is finally finding peace, planting roots, tending to friendships, building something slow and quiet, he still carries that residue of Golb. Not active, not loud. Just a faint static buzz in the narrative. The feeling that somewhere out in the multiverse a story is missing a page, and he was once the tear in the binding. It doesn't make him dangerous anymore. But it does make him haunted. Not in a scary way. More like, you know that feeling when you walk into a room and forget what you came for and that soft, distant wrongness? That's normal man. Walking proof that chaos can be survived, but never quite scrubbed clean. And maybe that's okay. Maybe we're not supposed to fully erase the things that break us. Maybe we carry the scars not because they're beautiful or meaningful or poetic, but because they're ours. And maybe, just maybe, that's what makes Normal Man one of the most important characters in all of Adventure Time. He doesn't fight with swords. He doesn't save the world. He just keeps trying. Every single day, despite the static, despite the lingering ache, despite knowing how far he fell and how lucky he is to be standing at all. There's a line someone once said about healing. It's not about going back. It's about going forward with the pieces you still have. And that's Magic Man's story. A man shattered by love lost, unmade by forces he couldn't comprehend, turned into an echo of Golb's madness, who still managed to become something new. Not perfect, not powerful, just present. Still weird, of course. Let's not pretend that Toast songs went anywhere. But present. And that, dear listener, is more heroic than it sounds. So next time you see a character who seems beyond help, a villain too broken, a weirdo too loud, a trickster too far gone, remember Magic Man and how the madness didn't define his ending. It just wrote the prologue to something softer. Let's take a moment to breathe. In and out. Close your eyes if you haven't already. Imagine a quiet Martian hilltop, red sand cooled by starlight. The breeze hums a little tune. It doesn't have lyrics, but if it did, they'd probably rhyme with forgiveness and eggplant. And there sits Normal Man. Not meditating, not chanting, just being still. The stillness is something he never had when he was Magic Man. Chaos doesn't leave room for silence. Madness fills every corner of your mind with noise, color, contradiction. But here now he sits in the hush of the universe and finally lets it all catch up with him. And this is how you resist Golb. Not with violence, not with spells or armies or superweapons. Built out of gumdrops and grief, you resist Golb with stillness, with presence, by accepting that you were broken and choosing not to break anything else. Because, let's be honest, Golb doesn't feed on evil. He feeds on unraveling, confusion, meaninglessness, a lack of pattern, of connection, of story. And every time Magic Man told a joke with no punchline, turned a person into a sound effect, erased someone's face because it made him laugh. He wasn't being funny. He was inviting Golb in, little by little, and he didn't even know it. But now, as Normal Man, he's doing the opposite. He's planning stories again, watering small moments of meaning, making up names for clouds, writing tiny poems about soup. One of them goes, "This soup is too hot, but I drink it anyway because it tastes like trying." He insists, it's not about marbles. No one believes him. And the beautiful thing is, he's not doing it to prove anything. Not to earn redemption. Not to atone. Just to live. To leave the world slightly kinder than he found it that morning, even if it's just by smiling at a lumpy rock and calling it his friend. He named the rock Larry. Larry is a good listener. You see, that's the final truth about Magic Man's journey. Golb didn't make him a monster. He did that to himself, lost in grief, turned inward, unable to process what had happened. But Golb amplified that spiral just like he does with everything. And that's the great danger of Golb's touch. He doesn't force anyone to be evil. He just tilts the floor, makes it easier to fall, softly removes the handrails from your soul until you forget there ever were any. And once you forget meaning, well, then you're just noise, just chaos in a bright hat. But Normal Man remembered something vital. Even when everything else was gone, even when magic was stripped from him, even when the world stopped calling him anything but weird guy with the toast song. He remembered what it felt like to love someone, to lose someone, to want to be held. And that memory, fragile as it is, was enough. Not to win, not to undo the past, but to stop the unraveling. To say, this far, no further. So if Golb is the embodiment of meaninglessness, then Magic Man's quiet post-magic life is the counterspell. Not loud, not heroic, just intentional. A life made of choices. A life that matters even if it looks silly from the outside. Especially because it looks silly from the outside. Because when you wear a lobster on your head just to make a friend laugh, you're weaving joy back into the narrative. You're pushing back the void, one moment at a time. So tonight, as you drift off, let that be the lesson that floats with you into your dreams. You don't have to be a hero. You don't have to save the world. You just have to choose. Choose stillness. Choose presence. Choose to be kind, even when it's easier not to be. Choose soup poems. Choose whatever little bits of meaning help hold your story together. Because every one of those choices is a stitch in the fabric of the world. And Golb, he can't unmake what's held together by love. Hey there, sleepyheads. Still with me? Good. You're doing great. Maybe your mind's starting to blur into that dream space where time feels soft and names get floaty. That's okay. This part of the story was never meant to be told fully awake. Because now, Golb comes to Ooo. Not as a whisper. Not as a maybe. Not as a, was that just the wind? No, this time, Golb arrives in full. And the way he gets there, well, it starts with love, doesn't it always? But we'll get to that. First, picture this. The skies above Ooo, normally full of smiling clouds and faintly humming stars, begin to bend, not break, just twitch, like someone tugging at a thread in a sweater. One little snag. And at first, no one really notices. The birds still chirp. The candy people still bounce. Princess Bubblegum's got 7 experiments bubbling simultaneously, and only 3 are exploding. Pretty average Tuesday, but there's a tension in the air. A stillness under the silliness, like something vast is listening. Now, Golb doesn't just appear. That's not how he works. He's not a monster you summon with candles and chanting. He's not waiting behind a curtain ready to make a dramatic entrance. He's pulled in. Or more accurately, he bleeds through when something opens the right kind of door. And in Ooo, that door opens through one of the saddest, strangest love stories ever told. Simon and Betty. You know them. The man who wore the crown. The woman who followed him through time. Both broken, both brilliant, both orbiting each other like twin moons destined to never touch again. And Betty. Oh, Betty. She wasn't content to let that be the ending. Let's rewind just a little, shall we? After everything Simon had lost, his mind, his identity, his Simonness, he'd finally been restored. Sort of. Enough to be Simon again, enough to miss Betty like a storm misses the sea. And Betty, brilliant and chaotic in her own right, had traveled across time to find him, to save him, to make him whole. But what she found wasn't just a broken man. It was a broken world. A timeline where Simon had suffered too long, a crown that had consumed too much, and a multiverse that didn't play fair. So Betty did what no one else dared. She made a wish, and not a little wish. A Prismo-level, reality-bending, rip-the-sky kind of wish. She wished to keep Simon safe, no matter what. And oh, the multiverse listened. But here's the thing about wishes. They're never clean. They bend, they twist, they find loopholes. And Betty's wish, sincere, powerful, born from pure love, did something no one expected. It summoned Golb. Not directly. Not like, "Hey Siri, call Golb." But the act of wishing to rewrite fate, to prevent suffering across timelines, created a kind of metaphysical rupture. And through that rupture, Golb seeped in, a being of pure disorder, of anti-reason, of story erasure. And now, he was looking at Ooo. When Golb arrives, he doesn't roar, he doesn't scream. He is floating above the world like a nightmare someone forgot to wake up from. 4 faces shifting, warping, speaking in voices that don't quite sync. His body is chaos given mass, shapes that don't belong together and yet are, limbs that don't move so much as flicker between positions they were never meant to hold. You don't look at Golb, you experience him. And for Ooo, that experience is almost the end. Buildings dissolve, not collapse, dissolve, like they've been remembered incorrectly. The air itself begins to taste wrong. Lemongrab screams, naturally, but for once, it's actually justified. Jake stretches toward the sky, not to fight, but just to try and understand. And Finn, poor Finn. He's never faced anything like this. Monsters? Sure. Ancient weapons? Done. Sentient bears who steal your identity? Tuesday? But this is unmaking. No villain to punch, no switch to flip. Just the unraveling. And right in the middle of it all, Simon and Betty. Because as Golb descends on Ooo, the two of them are forced to confront what this really means. That Betty's wish, her love, her sacrifice, has brought forth the very thing she never meant to invite. Not evil, not wrath, but pure cosmic chaos. The price of rewriting fate is unraveling everything. It's strange, isn't it? For all the weirdness that Ooo has weathered, ice-powered monarchs, time-traveling elephants, vampires with bass guitars, nothing feels quite like this. Because Golb doesn't destroy things the way a villain does. He doesn't want to win. He just is. A walking paradox. A manifestation of dissonance. The absence of meaning given shape and texture, and an uncomfortable number of teeth. He hovers in the sky over Ooo, unmoving, but everything beneath him trembles. Rocks flicker between being pebbles and boulders. The sky jitters like a television losing signal. Colors melt. Sound stutters. One poor gnome hears his own thoughts echo in reverse and spends the rest of the day arguing with a tree about taxes. It's surreal. It's quiet. And yet somehow it's the loudest thing the world has ever felt. And at the heart of it all is Betty. Her wish still echoes in the fabric of the multiverse. A raw, unresolved plea to keep Simon safe, to protect him from the pain of becoming the Ice King again, from forgetting himself, from losing her. But in wishing to hold Simon in place, she accidentally tore a hole in the narrative, and Golb, chaos incarnate, rushed in to fill it. Now here she stands, facing the unfaceable, with the man she loves at her side, fragile, confused, no longer magical, but finally himself, and Ooo unraveling around them. No pressure. Meanwhile, Finn and Jake scramble to do what they've always done, save the day. But this time, fists don't help. Jake tries stretching to the sky, forming a giant hand to push Golb away, only to find his body won't obey him anymore. His shapes flicker, like his very idea of Jakeness is being reinterpreted by a force that doesn't believe in shapes. Finn shouts, calls out, throws everything he has at the sky. But Golb doesn't notice. Not out of cruelty, just apathy. Golb doesn't fight. He doesn't respond. He just hovers. And that somehow is worse. This moment, this eerie silence in the face of annihilation, becomes a turning point. Not for the world, for Betty, because she sees it now. Not just the mistake, not just the chaos, but the truth beneath it. That Golb is not here to punish. He is simply the result of what happens when love tries to defy the rules of reality. And in that quiet, heartbreaking instant, she understands she can't undo her wish, but she can complete it, not by stopping Golb, but by joining him. What happens next is the softest act of courage Ooo has ever witnessed. Betty takes Simon's hand. She looks at him, really looks, and smiles. Not because everything is fine, not because she knows what's coming, but because she accepts it. And then she steps forward, toward Golb, toward the cosmic disorder. There's no fight, no blast of light, just emerging. Betty fuses with Golb, not consumed, not erased, but intertwined, like two thoughts in the same dream, folding into one another. And in doing so, Golb changes. Not completely, but just enough. His chaos shifts, becomes slightly quieter, less jagged. Ooo doesn't heal instantly, but the unraveling stops. The sky steadies. The rocks return to their normal size. Jake's body no longer jitters like an off-key banjo. And Finn, he just falls to his knees and watches. Because he doesn't understand what just happened. But he feels it. That something big has been prevented. And something even bigger has been sacrificed. And above it all, Golb, now with a faint glimmer of Betty inside him, vanishes. Not defeated. Just gone. Like a dream slipping out the back door of your brain the moment you wake up. No explosion. No victory dance. Just silence. And the soft rustle of leaves returning to their original shade of green. The world doesn't throw a parade. There's no confetti, no dramatic score, no thanks for saving us banner drifting across the Candy Kingdom skyline. Because how do you even process something like that? You don't. You just keep going. And that's exactly what Ooo does. The grass regrows where it had started to fade. The clouds stop melting sideways. Lumpy Space Princess complains that her voice sounds too normal again, and nobody is quite sure if that's good or bad. And deep underground in forgotten catacombs and decaying ruins, the few remaining cultists of Golb whisper to each other. Did he leave, or did he sleep? But the world doesn't answer, because the world is tired. And so is Simon. He's still here, still alive, still himself. But something's missing, and not just in a metaphorical, poetic way. There's an absence in the air around him, a kind of hush, like the universe is holding its breath every time he walks past. Because Betty is gone. Not dead, not destroyed, just part of something too big to understand. Part of Golb now. Or maybe Golb is part of her. Simon doesn't say much at first. He doesn't collapse or scream or turn into another villain. No second crown, no magical relapse. He just walks. He walks to the places they used to visit. He opens old books and forgets why. He watches the sky and wonders if it's looking back. And he carries a question in his chest like a pebble in his shoe. Did she save me, or did I lose her forever? The answer, of course, is both. And that's what hurts the most. Finn and Jake try to be there for him. Finn brings sandwiches. Jake brings jazz. Neither of them says sorry because it doesn't feel like a sorry kind of loss. It's not something that broke. It's something that shifted. Like a dream you almost held. Then forgot the moment you opened your eyes. And somewhere, deep in the folds of the cosmos, Golb, now touched by something unfamiliar, doesn't return. He doesn't spread chaos again. He doesn't roar or whisper or bend the fabric of anything. He just pauses. Maybe because Betty is still in there somewhere. A soft voice in a cacophony of nonsense. A tether to something human. A presence that says, no, not this one. And for now, at least, that's enough. Back in Ooo, the people try not to speak Golb's name. Not because they're scared, but because they know it doesn't work that way. You don't summon Golb. You don't explain him. You don't even remember him clearly. He slips out of memory like water through fingers, leaving only damp thoughts and slightly confused expressions. One banana guard swears he saw a jellyfish made of regret, but everyone thinks he just needs a nap. But Simon remembers. Not perfectly. Not logically. But emotionally. In dreams, he sees flickers, Betty's face shifting between forms, Golb's chaos swirling with flashes of blue and white. Sometimes she's whispering. Sometimes she's laughing. Once she's just looking at him. Not sad. Not happy. Just there. And he wakes up weeping. Not because it's painful, but because it's the only proof he has that she's still somewhere. And this quiet ache is what Golb left behind in Ooo. Not destruction. Not ruins. Just unanswered questions. A silence that hums just under the skin of reality. A feeling, now and then, that the world is thinner than it used to be. And that somewhere, out beyond the stars, a presence watches. Not hungrily. Not angrily. Just curiously. Almost as if it's wondering what comes next. And so, Ooo moves on. That's the most mysterious part, really. How a world so thoroughly shaken, so nearly unwritten, can just get back up. Not instantly, not without scars, but gradually. Marceline sings songs again, soft ones that tremble a little more than they used to. Princess Bubblegum sets aside her lab coats and builds gardens instead, because sometimes growing things is louder than science. Even Lemongrab, bless his unsettling soul, declares a public day of quiet. He only screams into a pillow once every hour on the hour. It's real progress. Life continues, because that's what life does. It writes over the cracks. Sometimes it fills them with joy. Sometimes it just lets them be part of the floor. But there are still quiet places. Tiny, forgotten corners of Ooo where Golb's touch lingers. Not in horror, not in fear, but in feeling. A tree that blooms backwards every other Wednesday. A puddle that reflects faces you've never seen. A hill where the wind always sounds like it's singing. Little reminders that something impossible happened here. And it left behind possibilities. As for Simon, his story isn't over. No grand quests, no magical destiny. Just long walks, simple breakfasts, quiet pages in old books. Sometimes he talks aloud just in case Betty is still listening. Sometimes he knows she is. And on clear nights, when the stars align just so, he feels the sky tilt, ever so gently, like something immense is shifting its gaze, not to harm, not to erase, just to remember. There are theories, of course. Some say Betty isn't gone, that she exists now as a thread in Golb's pattern, subtly nudging him away from total destruction, that somewhere in the impossible geometry of his form there's a heartbeat, slow, steady hers. Others believe she became something new, not a victim of chaos, but its counterbalance, a kind of cosmic governor keeping the multiverse from slipping into the abyss. And then there are those who simply say, she loved him. That's the whole story. And honestly, that's enough. Because what happened that day wasn't a battle. It wasn't a war. It was a choice. Betty chose to face chaos. Not with fear, but with love. And love, in its quiet, gentle way, changed Golb. Not into something good. Not into something safe. But into something aware. And awareness is the first crack in the armor of unmaking. That's the true legacy of Golb's visit to Ooo. Not the flickering sky, not the bending buildings or the silence that followed, but the realization that even the oldest chaos in the universe can be touched by something small, something fragile, something kind. So when you lay your head down tonight, drifting between dreams and story space, if you feel a hum, if you feel a strange softness in the air like the universe is listening, don't be afraid. It's not Golb coming for you. It's just the part of him that remembers what it was like to be loved. Still wrapped up, still sinking slowly into that cozy void between waking and dreaming. Good, because for this next part of the story, you'll want to be still, very still. This isn't a chapter about explosions or cosmic fights or sudden revelations. This is about understanding. And sometimes, understanding is quiet. Tonight we ask a question that's puzzled philosophers, wizards, and talking squirrels for centuries. What is Golb? Not what does he want, or how do we stop him, but what is he really? And maybe even harder, is Golb evil? Spoiler. The answer might be no. Also spoiler, it's not good either. Let's take a moment to clear the slate. In most stories, chaos is a villain. It's fire, it's destruction, it's the guy with the glowing eyes and a backstory that involves betrayal and a dramatic fall into lava. But Golb is different. Golb doesn't hate. Golb doesn't punish. Golb doesn't even seem to notice this most of the time. He isn't malevolent. He's fundamental. Like gravity. Like time. Like that weird feeling when you walk into a room and forget what you were doing. He just is. A cosmic constant of disorder. A law of unnature. And if you're looking for good and evil in that, well, you're trying to assign morals to a storm cloud. Golb isn't cruel. But he is corrosive. He doesn't strike with anger. He seeps. He's the silence between words. The typo in a sacred text, the crumbling of a wall you didn't realize was load-bearing until it was gone. And yet, that doesn't make him bad. Not in the classic sense. Because here's the twist, sleepy listener. Without Golb, the universe wouldn't function. Sounds wild, right? But think about it. If nothing ever broke, if every story just kept going forever, uninterrupted, there'd be no space for change, no endings, no grief, sure, but no growth either. Golb, in his strange, unsmiling way, creates the space for transformation, by ending things, by unraveling what no longer fits. Let's put it this way. Imagine a big, cosmic storybook. Each page is a world, a character, a timeline. Now most forces, Prismo, the cosmic owl, even Death himself, work to keep those pages turning. Golb tears pages out. But not because he's mean, because sometimes the page has reached its end. And something new can only begin once the old is gone. Harsh? Yes. But necessary? Maybe. That doesn't mean we should invite Golb over for tea. He's a terrible guest. Doesn't sit, doesn't speak, floats ominously over the teacups until they scream. But it does mean we need to look at him with more than just fear. We need to see Golb as what he truly is. Not a monster, not a god, but a function. a balancing force in a multiverse that would otherwise spiral into perfect, meaningless harmony. And perfect harmony is just another kind of stasis. The land of Ooo is many things. Beautiful, ridiculous, violent, silly. But more than anything, it's alive. And to be alive means to change, to lose things, to break things, to cry a little bit on your way to something new. And Golb, whether he knows it or not, makes that possible. So if Golb isn't evil, why does everyone react like he is? Why the hushed whispers in ancient scrolls? Why do some kingdoms erase his name from history, while others draw it inside spirals and scream into the sea? Well, sleepyheads, that's because Golb isn't just a being. He's a mirror. Not the kind you use to fix your hair before a Candy Kingdom dinner party. More like the kind that shows you everything you don't want to see. He reflects fear. Not because he creates it, but because he reveals it. And oh, how that unsettles people. Take the cults, for example. Yes, there are cults. Of course there are cults. This is Ooo, after all. Across time and space, little pockets of worship have risen up around Golb's name, not because they understand him, but because they want to use him. That's the funny thing about chaos. Everyone thinks they can aim it, as if Golb is a weapon waiting for the right master. Spoiler alert, he's not. One cult carved his image into mountain stone using melted mirrors and whispers. They believed Golb was a gatekeeper to ultimate truth. So they removed their own eyes to see past reality. They mostly bumped into furniture and started smelling colors. Another group thought Golb could grant immortality by dissolving the soul and rebuilding it from noise. They fed their emotions to enchanted jars. The jars exploded. It was messy. But again, these groups weren't wrong to feel Golb's presence. They were just so desperate to control it, to explain it, to make it a tool, that they forgot. Golb isn't something you summon. He's something you invite by accident. By pushing too far. By breaking too much. By wishing too hard. Then there are those who feared him without worship. Old rulers, ancient queens. They painted his symbols onto the underside of shields, buried his name beneath spell-locked vaults, not to honor him, but to warn future generations. Don't go looking for meaning in the noise. One particularly paranoid king, who ruled for exactly 12 minutes, declared that saying Golb's name while chewing bread would cause your jaw to unhinge and start talking on its own. We can neither confirm nor deny this, but it would explain why that kingdom's national anthem is just awkward humming. And yet, despite all this reverence and fear, Golb remains unchanged, unbothered. You can light 1,000 candles in his name or scream poetry into the void. He does not flinch. Because Golb doesn't need belief. He doesn't want it. He exists outside of it, like erosion, like entropy, like that weird sock you always lose in the dryer. He just is. Which brings us to the really haunting part, sleepyheads. If Golb is always here, if he's not summoned, but revealed, then maybe the real danger isn't Golb himself. Maybe it's the conditions that let him slip through. Grief, obsession, ambition, fear. The need to fix something so badly that you rip a hole in everything else. Sound familiar? It should. We've seen it before with Magic Man, with Betty, even with Simon. None of them were evil. But all of them, in their pain, tugged at the threads of the universe just a little too hard. And when those threads break, Golb listens. But here's the hopeful part. Just because Golb arrives doesn't mean it's the end. We've seen that too. When Betty met him with love. When Magic Man gave up madness. When Finn chose to ask questions instead of swinging his sword. Golb might unmake things. But sometimes we remake them better. So let's get even more dreamlike, shall we? Let's go past the cults and into the realm of the thinkers, those who didn't scream Golb's name into the abyss, but instead whispered it into libraries. You see, long before most creatures could even pronounce existential dread, the wizards of Ooo had a term for Golb, the breath between equations. Sounds poetic, right? Until you realize what they meant. Golb was what existed in the pause, the moment between spell and effect, between logic and outcome, between order and something just beyond it. One wizard theorized that all magic leaks Golb, that every spell, every healing charm, every fireball, every turn this banana into a tap-dancing lizard incantation comes with a microscopic cost. Tiny flecks of imbalance, like spiritual static. He wrote, "Magic is not creation. It is borrowed structure, and Golb is the interest." He disappeared a week later. Some say he transcended. Others say he became soup. Both may be correct. But not all philosophers feared Golb. Some embraced him, not as a deity, not as a doom, but as a boundary. A reminder that no system is eternal. That all things, kingdoms, ideas, love songs, lunchboxes, eventually unravel. And instead of mourning that, they celebrated it. They called themselves the gentle entropists. Their slogan, "Everything ends. Let's make it beautiful." They threw parties at funerals, wrote lullabies instead of war chants. They said the best resistance to Golb was not to fight the ending, but to give it meaning. Their leader famously stated, "When Golb comes, may he find us laughing." Then he tripped over a candle and turned into a mushroom. Not symbolic, just clumsy. Even Hunson Abadir, Marceline's ever-dramatic, soul-sucking father, had thoughts on Golb. Dark ones. He believed Golb wasn't just neutral chaos, but a reset mechanism. A failsafe baked into the multiverse. A force that activates when imbalance reaches critical mass. Kind of like hitting Control plus Alt plus Delete on all of reality. Hunson feared Golb, but not because he wanted to unmake things. He feared that Golb didn't care what got erased. Good, evil, candy, demons. It was all just background noise to him. And in a way, that scared Hunson more than anything. Because for once, he wasn't the scariest thing in the room. But then there's another perspective. A smaller, quieter one. Finn's. You see, after Golb left Ooo, Finn never wrote down what happened. He didn't build a monument. He didn't give speeches. He just remembered. In his own way. When asked about Golb years later, he said, "It felt like I was standing in the middle of a song being unsung." And then he added, "But even then, I could still hear a little humming." That's what stuck with him. Not the chaos, not the terror, but the hum. The small note of Betty or love or resistance or something still humming inside the silence. And that, to Finn, was hope. Because maybe Golb isn't the end of the song. Maybe he's the rest. The pause. The breath. The moment between chords that makes the next note matter. We've been so conditioned to fear disorder, to run from it, fight it, deny it. But maybe Golb teaches us something braver. That sometimes letting go is sacred. Sometimes falling apart is necessary. And sometimes chaos isn't trying to break us. It's trying to remind us that we're not permanent, that none of this is. And that's okay. Because the beauty of Ooo Is that even when everything collapses? Someone always starts building again. With gum, with sticks, with old socks and brand new songs. And that's where meaning begins. In the ruins. In the hum. So now we're here. At the edge of what anyone truly knows about Golb. We've wandered through cults, through wizard theories and mushroom philosophers, through funerals that end in lullabies. We've walked alongside fear, curiosity, reverence, and a strange kind of peace. And what we've found isn't a conclusion, but a stillness. Because maybe that's the point. Golb isn't meant to be explained. He's not a puzzle to solve, a code to crack, or a final boss to defeat. He's a reminder that everything we love, everything we build, everything we become is temporary. And that might sound sad, sleepyheads. But maybe it's not. Maybe that's exactly why things matter. Because they don't last. The song ends. The candle burns out. The gumball rolls into the storm drain and vanishes forever. But while it was here, it was real. And real things, however brief, leave echoes. Like Betty's voice in Golb's silence. Like Finn's hum in the middle of unmaking. Like the scent of soup on a rainy day that makes you think of someone you loved when you were small. These are the things Golb can't erase. Not because he isn't powerful enough, but because they don't resist him. They just are. Soft, unrecorded, unwritten. But woven into the fabric of the universe like tiny threads of starlight. So what is Golb? He's the flickering at the edge of the dream. He's the end of the sentence. The last exhale before a new beginning. And we don't have to fear him. Because fear only makes the unraveling faster. Instead, we can rest. We can let go. We can hold our stories gently, knowing they won't last. And that's what makes them precious. Finn once said, "The world's weird, man, but it's ours." Even with Golb in the sky. Even with time melting and reality hiccuping. Even with all the endings stitched into our beginnings, the world is still ours. And that means it's also beautiful. So as you drift off tonight under your blankets and beneath your sleepy little stars, don't worry if your dreams get strange, if things flicker, if names blur, if time folds a little sideways. That's just the universe humming. That's just the breath between stories. That's just Golb not hurting you. Just reminding you that this moment, right now, is real. And when it ends, something new will begin. This part of the story isn't loud, doesn't have explosions or big glowing eyes or Jake stretching into a toaster just because he could. This part is softer, stranger. Like waking up at 3 a.m. and thinking you heard something breathing in the closet. But it's probably just a coat. Probably. Because tonight, we ask a question that never really got answered. Is Golb still watching? Now, before we go conjuring horror movie vibes, relax. This isn't about fear. This is about curiosity. Because when Golb left, after Betty merged with him, after the skies stilled, and reality quit flickering like a broken VHS, he didn't explode. He didn't vanish in a puff of fire. He just withdrew, like fog rolling back into the sea. And that has left a very specific kind of silence across the multiverse. The kind that makes people whisper. The kind that makes the cosmic owl double-check his visions. The kind that makes Prismo, pause mid-chill to look at the ceiling like, wait, was that? See, even when Golb is gone, he's not quite gone. There are echoes. Strange things, little things, things that maybe shouldn't be there. Let's start with something simple. The stars. After Golb's departure, a few of Oo's stargazers began noticing a new formation. Faint, barely visible, but distinct. 4 dots, almost a square. It's not labeled on any of the old maps, not noted in any wizard charts. They call it the still face. Some say it's coincidence. Others aren't so sure. And then there's the dreams. Simon, Marceline. Even BMO, who technically doesn't sleep but insists they nap emotionally every Thursday at noon. They've all mentioned seeing something. Not Golb exactly, but a presence. A place where sound goes quiet. A space that hums in the wrong key. Simon describes it like this. It's like I'm walking down a hallway made of mirrors and I can't see myself in any of them. But I can see something else. Watching. BMO said, I dreamed I was a cloud, and the sky told me my shape was wrong. Classic BMO. But what do these dreams mean? Are they just leftovers? Traumatic echoes from a reality that was almost undone? Or are they signs? Hints that Golb is still out there. Still interested? Not in invading again, but in observing. Like a storyteller watching the characters long after the book has closed. Like a reader stuck on the final sentence refusing to turn the page. And if Golb is watching, then why? Some believe he's looking for something. That Betty, still faintly alive inside him, acts like a compass. That she guides him now, not with control, but with influence. Soft thoughts buried deep in chaos. And Golb listens. Or at least pauses. Maybe he's not scanning the multiverse for weakness. Maybe he's searching for understanding. For a glimpse of what made Betty choose him. And maybe, just maybe, he's beginning to feel something. Not love, not regret, but awareness. The first step toward change. Now that's a strange idea, isn't it? The concept that a being as old and wild and unstructured as Golb could evolve. Not by choice, but by exposure. By proximity to something so radically different. Compassion, sacrifice, stubborn love, that even chaos itself begins to twitch with the echo of a heartbeat. And here's the coziest thought of all sleepyheads. What if that's what Betty wanted? Not to destroy Golb, not to trap him, but to plant a seed. A single, unassuming little idea inside the vast silence of cosmic disorder. That idea? You can be more than this. So let's drift a little deeper. Beyond dreams. Beyond stars. Down into the little things. The objects, the moments, the oddities that don't scream Golb, but gently tap you on the shoulder and whisper, that wasn't supposed to happen. You see, after Golb left, there were a few leftovers. Not monsters, not chaos storms, just items. Things that don't quite belong. Take the book that writes backwards. Found in the ruined remains of a wizard's tower that didn't exist a week earlier, it's bound in something soft and faintly warm to the touch. When opened, it writes on its own, but only in reverse. And not mirror writing, no. The events it records seem to be unhappening. It described a fire in the Candy Kingdom that never took place. It detailed the vanishing of a mountain that still stands. And once, it simply wrote, hello. No one knows what it's writing to, or from. But someone or something is holding the pen. Then there's the clock that runs in circles. Literally. It doesn't tick forward or backward, it spins. Not the hands, the whole clock. Just slowly, lazily, like it's dizzy. What's weird isn't the motion. It's that everyone nearby starts remembering things differently. like they were always someone else. A gumdrop knight swore he used to be a bird. Peppermint Butler stared into it for 20 seconds and then refused to talk for 3 days, emerging only to whisper, "The icing is watching." Classic Peppermint Butler, honestly. But whether these objects are remnants of Golb's brief visit or just regular old magical weirdness, well, that depends on who you ask. Some believe these are echoes, not messages, not weapons, but leftovers. Like footprints in wet paint. Proof that even when Golb leaves, the world remembers him. Not because it wants to, but because it has to. Ooo is stitched together with duct tape and bubblegum magic. When something as big as Golb moves through it, it leaves ripples. And the multiverse? It doesn't forget those ripples easily. Especially not when they carry patterns. That's what got the cosmic owl worried. He began having dreams that didn't belong to anyone. Usually he sees fates, endings. He's like a celestial spoiler alert. But these new dreams, they're blank. Literally. Just static and humming, and sometimes a door. One time, he opened the door in the dream and saw a single eye looking back at him. Not angry, not sad, just there. He didn't dream again for a month. Prismo, of course, made jokes about it. Said, "Sounds like someone needs to reboot their brain juice, owl bro." But even he sounded a little off when he said it. Like the punchline had lost its punch. Like the whole multiverse was watching itself. And maybe that's the point. Maybe Golb's presence, whatever's left of it, isn't doing anything. It's just observing, seeing how the pieces fall, studying what changed. Like an echo, listening to the sound that made it. Not interfering, just noticing. But even that quiet noticing has power, doesn't it? It changes how people behave. Whole civilizations in distant universes have shifted how they do magic, all because someone felt the static return during a spell. Some wizards now use gloves made of dream silk. Some won't cast anything during solar eclipses. One group only chants backwards now, just in case the direction matters. It makes their spells very confusing, and one guy accidentally turned his head into a chair. Still, there's one place where the echo of Golb feels the loudest. It's not a temple. It's not a ruin. It's not even spooky. It's a glade. A little clearing deep in the woods outside of Ooo. Quiet. Peaceful. Filled with strange flowers that only bloom when no one is watching. Simon goes there sometimes. He sits. He breathes. He doesn't speak. But he always brings 2 cups of tea. One for him. One for someone else. No one's ever seen that second cup empty. So now let's take that thought even further. Let's go past the stars, past the multiverse, past even the shape of thought itself. Let's imagine something strange. Something a few bold, maybe slightly sleep-deprived thinkers in Ooo have started to wonder. Something even Peppermint Butler wrote down in a journal, then immediately burned. What if Golb is dreaming? Not in the way mortals dream, no teddy bears, no missed school exams, no I'm flying, but also failing algebra dreams. Golb's dream wouldn't be like ours. It would be deeper, wider, dreaming in the sense of becoming. A suspended state of potential, like a storm hovering just above the sea. Still silent, but full of endless maybe. Some theorists suggest Golb's nature changed the moment Betty entered him. Not just philosophically, not symbolically, but mechanically. That her presence, her will, her love, confused him. Imagine being made of pure noise and decay, and suddenly bumping into intention. emotion. A single consistent desire to save someone else. Not to absorb or break or rearrange, but just to protect. That's like handing a cat a saxophone and asking it to play jazz. Something in Golb's being might have short-circuited, or paused. And maybe that's when he started to dream. What would Golb dream of? Hard to say. But some believe the evidence is out there. Odd events that don't feel like chaos, but don't feel like order either. Like small places where logic stumbles. Corners of the world where it feels like reality is trying to remember how it works. A lake that reflects a version of you who hasn't made that mistake yet. A tunnel that seems longer when you walk back through it. A bird that sings in a language you understand only when you're crying. Not bad things, not destructive. Just soft errors. Dream glitches. Echoes of a dreamer who's still trying to understand what dreaming even is. One researcher called these G-threads little strands of Golb woven gently into the fabric of Ooo. He believed they weren't accidents. That Golb in his slumber was testing, experimenting, sending pieces of himself into the world not to destroy but to experience, to simulate kindness or loss or hope, to understand what made Betty choose him over all else. Of course, this theory is controversial. Many believe it's nonsense that Golb doesn't dream because dreaming requires vulnerability. And Golb, they argue, is incapable of that. But others disagree. Because if Golb truly was beyond all change, why did he stop? Why didn't he finish what he started? Why didn't Ooo fall? Why did Simon live? Why did the stars hum instead of scream? Finn once said it like this when asked about it by a kid in the future. You ever see a wolf stop chasing a deer? Not because it's tired, but because it suddenly saw something in the deer's eyes and was like, whoa. Then he added, Golb's not gone. He's just thinking. And if that's true, if Golb is thinking or dreaming, or just sitting in the void staring at the shape of love, trying to figure out what it meant, then maybe this is the safest Ooo has ever been, because nothing is more powerful than a being of chaos who's starting to understand feeling. Imagine the next time a Golb wakes, not roaring, not shattering, but whispering, asking a question instead of making a statement. Maybe not even in words, maybe in actions, maybe in a small gesture like a flower blooming in a place that once melted, or a child giggling at the edge of the universe, or a moment of stillness that feels so perfect it brings tears to your eyes, and you don't even know why. And what if that's Golb's next form? Not a monster, not a god, but a moment. Something small and full of wonder. Still strange. Still wild. But no longer empty. So, what do we do with all of this? All the theories. All the dreams. All the whispers that Golb might still be out there. Not tearing the world apart, but simply watching. We don't know if they're true. That's the honest answer. But maybe that's okay. Maybe it's more than okay. Because sometimes the comfort doesn't come from certainty. It comes from the story itself, from asking the question, from wondering together. And in a strange cosmic way, maybe Golb is the perfect bedtime story. Not because he's gentle, not because he's kind, but because he reminds us that there is always something bigger than us, something unknown. Something we don't have to defeat or define or even understand. Just something to acknowledge. Something to nod toward in the dark and say, I know you're out there, and I'm going to sleep anyway. Because isn't that what courage is? not fighting the monster, not solving the mystery, but choosing to rest, to be vulnerable, to trust that even if the universe is vast and weird and occasionally full of reality-bending entities named Golb, there's still a space in it for you. For your blanket. For your quiet thoughts. For your next dream. And if Golb is still watching, maybe he's not watching to hurt. Maybe he's watching to learn, to feel. To remember that once upon a time, someone gave up everything, just to keep another soul safe. And maybe that left an echo even he can't shake. Maybe Golb is the hum at the edge of your sleep tonight. Not the kind that makes you afraid to close your eyes, but the kind that says, everything ends, but not tonight. So wherever you are, sleepyhead, whether you're under blankets in Karachi or curled up on a couch in Toronto, whether the stars are out or the rain is soft against your window, take a breath. Feel how small you are. Then feel how safe you are. Because even the vastest chaos can't unmake this moment, this story, this piece. And hey, if your dreams get a little strange tonight, if they hum, if they flicker, maybe just smile. Because maybe, just maybe, Golb is dreaming too. Thank you for joining me for tonight's story. If you're still awake, drop a comment. Tell me what time it is where you are, and what part of Ooo you'd visit if you had the chance. But if your eyes are heavy, if the stillness is wrapping around you like a soft blanket, then rest. You're safe. You're here. And the multiverse can wait till morning. Good night.